Hi, I'm Megan. I live in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and I'm here today to share my thoughts on the brand new pattern from Pattern Emporium, the Meet You There dress and top. I tested this pattern and it is releasing on October 28th in Australia, which I believe is like middle of the night after we go to bed on October 27th. Anyway, I'll include a link in the description box down below. This pattern will be on sale for the first few days after it's released, and often Pattern Emporium puts a few other of their patterns on sale when they release a new one, so make sure you check it out. It will be an affiliate link, so I'll get a small commission if you choose to click on that link, but it's no additional cost to you. So I made two versions of this pattern that I'm going to show you today, a top that I'm wearing right now and a dress. This pattern is really on trend right now. I think that this is the buffet dress of dreams if you like sewing with PDF patterns. This is a woven dress. So we've seen lots of these tiered, gathered, loose-fitting dresses for knit fabrics lately, but I can't recall seeing all that many that are made for woven fabrics. And I know that the fabric stores around me, particularly the Fabricland, have a really rich selection of woven fabrics, but not often the biggest selection of fun knit fabrics that I want to use. I made this top out of a polyester, lightweight polyester peach skin woven that I found in the clearance section at my local Fabricland. It is available on their Fabricville website, so I'll put a link in it below, which I think it probably is also available in store in some Fabriclands in Canada. But it's just a really lightweight woven polyester, 100% polyester. So this pattern comes with 3 different neckline options. It has a beautiful faced neckline, and the instructions are a little bit different than some of the other bias facings that I've done in the past, but I have really clear step-by-step instructions, and there's a video. So if you've never done one, this is a great place to start. This is the high neckline, which I made because I'm often on video calls, and I have found that if I go for a scoop or a lower neckline where I like to frame my camera, it often looks like that neckline dips much lower than it really does. So with the higher neckline, I get more of that coverage, and I think it's also really appropriate for the fall and winter season, like where it is here where I live. There's 2 different sleeve lengths as well as a sleeveless option, and it has a gorgeous, like easy fit bodice. So this is not a cinched in waist, it's not a fit and flare, it's a really loose, breezy dress. If you wanted to cinch it in, it comes with the option to add ties to tie it around the back or the front as you might like. I didn't include the ties in either of my options, but later I'll show you how I added a belt to cinch in the waist on my dress to give me more of that shape that I like. So this one is the longer 3/4 length sleeve. It has a bishop sleeve that's gathered with elastic, a little bit of a gather at the top of the sleeve cap, but not a lot. And it's got the waist hits just sort of around the natural waistline, and then I added 1 tier, so the short length tier, to this top to make a top. I didn't want it to be much shorter than it was, so I did a very narrow hem on my sewing machine to finish off this garment, but I think if I made this top again, I would make that tier longer, or I would use the long tier. So the cool thing about this pattern is the bodice and the sleeve options are pretty straightforward, but then you have sort of a choose your own adventure situation happening with the skirt. You have the option, there are 4 different tier sizes essentially. There's a short tier and a long tier for regular and tall sizes. I would recommend that you read the pattern instructions very thoroughly to figure out which versions you should be using. For me, I made a regular length bodice and then I made the tall length short tier, which sounds kind of funny, but think of it as like petite versus tall height, and then a short versus a long tier. So there are then 4 different tier lengths, because as you go longer on the tiers, you need those tiers to be longer. So there's a great number of measurements available on the measurement chart. You can also, I believe, print off the pattern pieces for each tier. So if you're a real beginner or you don't do well with numbers and charts and a ruler, I would recommend that you do that. This super relaxed bodice is really comfortable, I think, for returning to work. If you're returning to social events, you don't want something tight fitting because it's hot where you live, or you want a layer underneath it. Like I've put a snug fitting base layer underneath it, or you could wear a turtleneck underneath it if it's cold where you are. It's just really comfortable, and yet I think it also looks pretty polished, depending on your fabric choice. The other version that I made is a dress, and so this is it. This is also made with a polyester, lightweight polyester woven fabric that I bought at Fabricland. And actually, this is the very first woven garment fabric I ever bought. I have had this in my stash for years, and this sort of like ditzy floral print definitely was not in style when I bought this. I liked the colors. I thought, I don't know if I would ever wear a dress with that like tiny floral. At the time, really big, like tea roses and big punchy tropical flowers were all the rage. But now this ditzy floral is really popular. So I was really happy to have this in my stash. I think that this version, so I made a midi length and with the 3/4 sleeve again and the high neckline. And it's got that really like prairie dress vibe that's super popular right now. You can't go anywhere on Pinterest or to any store without seeing dresses like this that are that easy cut, the buffet dress as Sewing Bee called it, tiered skirt, maxi midi. There are mini lengths too for this pattern, but super on trend. I'm really quite pleased with it. I have a few different ideas about how I'm gonna style this dress as I move into winter. So I think it looks great on its own with tights and a belt. I think it looks fantastic under a leather motorcycle jacket. I think it'd be cute under a denim jacket or a really nice cardigan, like a Harper cardigan would look great with it. I think that it is the perfect dress to do that fake tucked in big knitwear sweater look. So what you do, I'll put in a picture, but essentially you put a belt on over top of your sweater and then you pull the sweater over top of it to make it blouse out and look like you've tucked it in to the skirt. But of course this is a dress, so I can get that two looks with it. I think it looks great with runners or high heels or ankle boots or a taller boot. It's a really versatile dress, and I think I'm gonna get a ton of wear out of it. The only downside to these versions is that they are really lightweight polyester, so they build up quite a bit of static. I'm gonna have to figure out like how to put an anti-static slip-on underneath it or use static guard on my tights just to make sure that I don't stick to everything and just live with it. But that's really just life in Calgary. Like this is a super dry climate, so static electricity and static cling is just something we have to get used to. I have a couple suggestions about how to make this project easier if you're a first-time. I wouldn't recommend this for a first-time project. It would be okay as a first woven garment, I think, if you're pretty comfortable with your sewing machine, if you know how to gather, or the trickiest part is that bias-facing neckline. So my suggestions about how to make this easier is to pick a fabric that when you press it, it holds that press. So this polyester does not hold a press. Like without a ton of spray starch, I cannot press it to get it to hold that crisp fold. But something like a rayon challis is beautiful, something with a linen in it, a lightweight cotton voile. You don't want anything too heavyweight because then it won't drape nicely, but something that will hold a press beautifully will absolutely make this much easier for you to work with. So the other thing to think about is when you're gathering. I chose to gather the traditional way by running 2 rows of basting stitches and then pulling the bobbin threads. The instructions show you how to gather with clear elastic, which is also an option. If you're going to do the gathering with the traditional method, consider using a contrasting color of thread when you do your gathering basting stitches, because if you're going to pick them out, which I typically would do because I tend to gather further down into the seam allowance. The seam allowance at 3/8 is pretty narrow to run 2 rows of gathering stitches within that. With a slippery fabric, I just found it like gets sucked into the needle plate. So if I had used a contrasting color like a hot pink or a red, it would have been much easier to see to pick those stitches out. I used black thread, so to be honest, I left most of those gathering stitches in place. No one will ever see that they're there except for me, but that's something you might want to think about. The other tip is when you're doing that bias facing on the neckline, the final step after you've attached it, understitched it, folded it over once and then twice is to top stitch it. So I always thought that when you're top stitching, it has to be, with the top of the neckline out so that you're running the top of your stitch along the top of the garment. And yes, that is probably technically correct. But I always fail to catch the double folded bias facing in some part of that neckline. It never fails that I will not catch it all the way, and then I have to pull it out and it gets really frustrating. I saw a video from Lifting Pins and Needles, and Karina had suggested that when you apply that bias facing, you just flip it over, and instead of top stitching, you just stitch along the underside. And did that ever make my life easier? So this one I top stitched as per the instructions. The second one, when I top stitched, I laid my fabric so that the bias facing, the folded facing, was on the top, and that the bobbin thread would be the stitch that shows on the outside of the garment on the right side. That way I was able to line up my needle, make sure that I had that double folded edge underneath and it's not going anywhere. It's just, until you're really comfortable with the bias facing, I think until I'm really comfortable with it and this fabric being difficult to press in place, it just made my life easier. And really, is it the right way? Is it the wrong way? I don't think it's the wrong way. It's probably not the textbook way, but it works just fine. I think that this top and this dress are versatile. They're great for hot weather. They're great for cooler weather if you want to layer. It's nice to wear something that's just comfortable and easy fitting. And I know that it's not clinging, and I think that they're flattering without being fussy. And I think that they are a real winner for pattern. Plus there's tons of options. So you could really go to town and make a bunch of different looks with this dress. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions about this pattern or the versions that I made, please leave them in the box down below. And I look forward to seeing your versions of the Meet You There pattern. I will see you again soon. Bye.